Hello, everyone. Today I'm speaking with Moira Dunne, who's a productivity and wellness speaker, trainer, and consultant. So thank you for coming on, Moira.
Hi, Kevin. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for the invitation. It's always lovely to talk productivity with a fellow productivity guru. So I'm enjoying this and looking forward to our chat.
So, yeah, hopefully we can get a bit nerdy about the psychology or tools as we go. It's always fun. So Moira, I wanted to ask you, do you have a personal definition of what it means to be productive? I know that's the name of your company. And could you expand on that, what it is?
Yeah, I suppose there's loads of ways of describing productivity. The way I sum it up for people really is, to me, it's about getting the important things you need to get done, getting those done in the time you have available to do it. So it's about kind of having a focus, a purpose, and then being able to use your time to get those things done. And it's not about working long hours and working extra time to get those things done. It's looking at the time that you want to spend at your work and making sure that you optimize that time and that you stay focused on the most important things you need to deliver.
Yeah, it's a great definition, or I fully agree as well. It's like, put it into the time it's got to, that you need it to occupy in order for you to have your work-life balance, not look at the task list and, oh my God, it's 10 p.m. and I didn't get that done and I have to go back and do it. It's like, no, plan it from the opposite way around, work smarter, not harder.
Yeah, I mean, the work-life balance piece is so important. But also just to say that that's the ideal and that's idealistic. And what I've just described and what you've just described, it's really hard to do it. So, and that's why people end up working longer hours or getting pulled off track because other people request different things from them. So it is the definition. And then I suppose the challenge is to look at how to actually make that happen. And I often say to people, it's not being super productive all day, every day. It's having some productive hours in your week, productive chunks of time, and even to achieve that is better than not.
Yeah, I fully agree. The map is not the territory. You can make your ideal plan and see how close you can get, and then the real trick comes of course correcting and noticing when you're sort of not exactly living or working the way you want to be. And what tools and techniques can we then apply to get back closer to the plan, which is, never really 100% on plan. There's no perfect week, but you can get closer. So then, Maura, I want to ask your advice for a hypothetical worker that I'll kind of describe. So if you have someone who's, and this has been me at different times, but it could be anyone at any different stage, who feel that they're going through their whole days just kind of reacting and haphazardly trying to balance just busyness versus I must take a break, only to arrive at the end of the day, whatever that end of the day time might be for them on that day, might even be different every day. And they're just feeling totally unsatisfied at the end of the day. They're like, what did I even do? What did I get done? And they want to kind of course correct. What are the first things you would have them do if they're a client of yours describing a situation like that?
Yeah, and Kevin, that is most people nowadays because the workplaces are so busy and people are generally working in a very reactive, responsive mode because there's so much communication constantly arriving. So it's very hard not to work in that mode. Sometimes I meet people that I train and they're kind of hard on themselves because they're thinking I shouldn't be working in that way. But I'm saying just look at the environment and the way things are. Of course you will. So it actually takes a bit of willpower to change it and to do something different. The first thing I say to people is to make a plan for their week. And when I talk about a plan, I don't mean a rigid plan that is every hour of every day mapped out, because that's just not realistic, because you need to be available to respond to the requests and the work that comes to you. But at least, as you go into each week or even at the end of the previous week, looking ahead to the week that's coming up, to try and take control of that week. I often say, take control of your week before it takes control of you. And at least if you've taken some time to look into what's happening next week, what do I need to get done? Also, maybe ask the question, what would make me feel satisfied with my week on Friday when I look back on how the week went? So try and predict what will make the week a success. And it could be that it's just 1, 2, maybe 3 things that you want to get done in and around all the other busy requests and responsive work that you do. But by identifying those key things at the outset, they give you your priorities. They're the things that you want to be proactive about. You're going to try and find some time then in your diary to work on those things. And you may have to shift that around. You may intend to do it on Wednesday morning, something else crops up, but it'll be on your mind, and then you'll be more motivated to find time on Thursday or Friday to get it done. So just by starting with that plan gives you clarity in your head. You're identifying what are the important things for me to achieve this week. And then that helps you then throughout the week to it's kind of a baseline, and then everything else happens on top of that. But it means that you can keep checking into that throughout the week. And I often just do something simple, like put those 3 things up on a Post-it on the board behind me here. And that reminds me throughout the week that, oh yeah, I did intend to get those things done. Because that's often what happens. Our work life is so busy, loads of new things crop up. Sometimes by the middle of the week, we've forgotten what we had on our plan at the start of the week. So just by having something visual, something tangible that you've set out as your aim or your objective for the week, it helps you stay on track, and it helps you find time to work on those things.
Certainly having that goal, yeah, that would be something to keep checking in. Like as you said, the Post-it, which for me might be on my monitor, for you might be on the wall behind. Or another way I have it is that I have a checklist, a shutdown checklist at the end of the day, to go through everything. And that's where I check what was my weekly goal again, and I actually did knock that off. So 2 left and it's Thursday. Which one might be more important? Can I get both done in the time remaining?
Yeah. And that's really important, Kevin, that kind of reassessment and juggling of the priorities. So even though you set something out on Monday and say that's the most important thing I want to achieve this week, by Wednesday or Thursday that may have changed because other things may have cropped up, and we have to be flexible. And I think that's important, that the plans are flexible. So because sometimes when I say to people make a plan, they say, well, there's no point, it's too rigid, I can't stick to it, it keeps changing. But I say, unless you have the plan, then you're never going to get those things done. There's a greater chance you'll get those priority pieces of work done if you've planned to do them. And as you say, you may not get them all done. You may get to the back end of the week and you're looking at the things that are still there on the list. But now you can reassess it based on the other things that have cropped up. And you can say, well, actually, I'll just pick that one thing. If I get that done by the end of the week, I can maybe move the other things into next week. But it gives you that kind of checkpoint, that baseline that helps to keep you on track.
Yeah, and I suppose this is a good starting point. There's lots more we could do in terms of scheduling and how one works. But this is, as I bring it back to my first question, the frantic worker who's just right now reacting all the time, this would be a good first place to be.